Well, good morning. It's good to be here. It's good to see you all. And as you've heard, every year the United Church of Christ designates one Sunday as Racial Justice Sunday during the month of February, which we all know is also Black History Month here in the United States. And officially on the church calendar, Racial Justice Sunday was 2 weeks ago, while Nicole and I and 23 other women were on retreat. So we're recognizing it today. And it feels especially important as years go by, and while things seem to change, those changes are slow, and history and what we humans do to one another is painful. And still, God calls us to love God and love our neighbor. As I prepared for today, I was also preparing for our conversation after worship today about the film Selma, which of course depicted the events in Selma, Alabama in 1965. Just 59 years ago, people who were Black were not allowed to vote in the southern United States, despite there being no law saying they couldn't. And we know from watching the footage and the film, we know the brutal tactics used by white law enforcement officers and civilians as a result of Black people simply trying to exercise their right to vote and peacefully demonstrate. And I know that there are some of you in this very room and watching on the live stream who were active and vocal participants in the civil rights movement. And that time can seem so far away in history, and yet it's in many of your lifetimes. And still, we reckon with racism today in this country, in this city. The theme, as you know, is Racial Justice Sunday in the UCC is the banned book blessing, and the attempts to silence and keep hidden the truth about our history as a racially divided nation from the very moment Europeans landed on this continent until today is quite disturbing and continues to astound me. And it's not just books on racial issues or our racist history that are banned. Books about the atrocities of the Holocaust, LGBTQ issues, sexuality, coming-of-age stories, books that talk about physical and sexual violence against women, and even the Bible are on banned book lists across this country. I'm going to list some books. I bet many of you have read them or they're in your personal libraries. The Diary of Anne Frank, Caste, The 1619 Project, So You Want to Talk About Race, Stamped, The Parable of the Sower, all of them on banned book lists. And here are some others. Genderqueer, a memoir. Kite Runner, The Color Purple, Beloved, The Bluest Eye, Mouse, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, The Handmaid's Tale, Where the Crawdads Sing, and my absolute favorite book from my adolescence, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And I bet you can name other books, and there's some really wonderful ones up here that people have brought in and from our own church library. And here's a statement I thought important to hear from our denominational leaders. In the United Church of Christ, we know that as people called to build a just world for all, we need each other's stories and experiences to live into the fullness of the body of Christ. We believe that banned books have a special vocation, a particular calling in our faith communities to help expand and enliven the image of God and empower us to reckon with truths that demand our loving accountability. So the Love is Louder campaign, which is the LGBTQ group, and the Join the Movement toward Racial Justice groups join together to invite us to bless banned books so that we might live out their calling and empower us to continue becoming God's kingdom of justice and love on earth as it is in heaven. And so all this is to say that a lot came together this week to cause me to reflect. and then the scripture that they offered about loving our neighbors. And I'm curious, we had this interesting conversation in the 9 o'clock. Who are our neighbors? Is it just the people that you live next door to? Or as Jesus invites us to think, our neighbors are everyone. It's not just people who think like us, look like us, worship like us, eat the same foods, dress like us, read the same books. What a small world if we only read books written by people who look just like us, who think just like us. Our world is expanded when we love and know our neighbor, when we read books from a different perspective, when we read history through another person's lived experience, when we read books relaying the truth about violence against women, when we read stories and memoirs written by trans people sharing their lived experience. When I was in seminary, which seems like a really long time ago, we had to take Christian history classes, and they were broken up early, middle, and modern church history. And the class that I took on modern church history required reading about history of the United States and Christianity written by people of color. We read books written about American church history written by Native Americans, Black people, Hispanic people, LGBTQ people. And believe you me, it was quite different and eye-opening from what I learned in my AP history class in high school. And even that was advanced. Those neighbors that I read about, that I read through their eyes, invited me to a different level of understanding and response to the history of this country, particularly Christianity. It invited me to think critically about what I'd been taught up until that moment. It invited me to dig deeper into what I thought I knew and understood. It invited me to excavate my own unquestioned privilege and deconstruct the history of American Christianity. Somehow the gravity of hate, destruction, superiority, and terror perpetrated on anyone who was non-white and a non-straight Christian male was lost on me for many years until I started reading books, watching movies and documentaries, and more currently following social media accounts written by people of color, queer people, and women. Now, when I was in seminary, I did not fear reading those books. And I didn't start to hate my country or my faith because I read those books. It did make me wrestle with the reality of the harm we have caused throughout the centuries, and I think that's a good thing. These kinds of books hold up a mirror to ourselves so that we can see that we have not always loved our neighbors as ourselves. I hear sometimes people say we shouldn't read those books because they make us feel shame. And did I feel some shame? Yeah. Do I feel some responsibility? Yes. Does it make me want to go and vote? You bet. Does it make me want to raise my voice for justice causes now? Absolutely. Because when we know better, we do better. I'm pretty sure Maya Angelou said that. And it makes me want to learn more about and ask God for forgiveness for the harm done to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and our LGBTQ friends and neighbors. Some of us are going on a civil rights pilgrimage to the South in April. I think Linda told me it's 6 weeks away. And I was reflecting this week about what does it mean to take a pilgrimage? Because we could just go and visit these sites, right? But for me, it's important that we talk about it as a pilgrimage, as a sacred journey to search for the meaning of these places and events. It's a journey of personal transformation and prayer. And it's a way to love our neighbor. On our pilgrimage, we'll visit Selma and we'll walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and I'll think about Rob, because I think he did this. And were you there, Harriet? I know you were active in the civil rights movement. Did you walk on the bridge in Selma? No. But I'm going to think of Rob because I know he did. And then we're going to go to Montgomery to visit several other important locations during the civil rights movement. And it will be a time to be in those places where people sacrifice their lives and their bodies and were terrorized because of their desire for equality. It will be a time for us to be prayerful and tune into the voices of oppressed people who continue today to scream for justice and equality. And so here's an invitation. We have 2 spots left. See Linda Woods after if you'd like to attend, go on this pilgrimage. And you're also invited to stay after to discuss the film Selma. But you know what else it makes me want to do as I reflected about this notion of pilgrimage and the importance of recognizing our own racism in this country is to do a civil rights pilgrimage here in Colorado. So here's some ideas. Kari's going to talk about one in a minute, so I'm going to save that for her. But there is an exhibit at the Boulder Museum of Art right now that's called Proclaiming Colorado's Black History. Almost all of us can go there. Another stop on the civil rights pilgrimage of Colorado would be the newest United States National Park that was dedicated on Valentine's Day, which is Amache. It's the Amache National Historic Site known as the Grenada Relocation Center in the 1930s and 40s. And this was one of 10 incarceration sites established by the War Relocation Authority during World War II to unjustly incarcerate Japanese Americans. That's here in Colorado, all of these. We could also go on down the road a few miles to the Sand Creek Massacre Historic Site, where unsuspecting Cheyenne and Arapaho people, mostly women, children, and the elderly, were brutally killed by soldiers on November 29th, 1864, under a white surrender flag. We could also visit Deerfield, Colorado. Does anyone know that site? Yep. It's one of the only remaining sites now, we call it a ghost town, where African Americans were able to come during the westward expansion, inspired by Booker T. Washington. And it was one of the towns established for the safe living and business of African Americans in the 19-teens and 1920s. I've had the privilege of visiting Lincoln Hills, which is up Coal Creek Canyon, up from where Rob built his home. Has anyone been there? Anyone heard of it? It's a beautiful spot. And it was a resort built in the 1920s by Black entrepreneurs from 5 Points in Denver that provided a safe mountain getaway for Black people because they couldn't really go anywhere else and be safe in Colorado. And if you get the chance to be invited, as I was, go, because I'll tell you, it felt sacred. It felt like I was walking on holy ground. You could also do a walking tour of 5 Points in Denver. You can see all sorts of wonderful places, music halls and restaurants and churches that were quite vibrant in the 50s and 60s and continue today. My in-laws are from the San Luis Valley. Their ancestors have been living there since well before this was a country. And I've had the privilege of walking the Stations of the Cross in the town of San Luis. And I've celebrated with my Latino family Santa Ana y Santiago Fiesta there, which is a big, fat deal and celebration. And I'm pretty sure I was one of 3 white people invited to participate that year. So we could go on. In the 9 o'clock gathering, I learned of history in Longmont we could go and visit. There's plenty of places here in Boulder we could visit, but there are all sorts of places here to celebrate the rich history of our Black neighbors. They have much to teach us, and we have much to learn. I think part of the reason to do pilgrimage is visit these sites and read books and hear from different voices is that we can be aware, we can seek forgiveness, and we can work on ways to improve the here and now. We can follow the lead of our BIPOC and LGBTQ neighbors when they ask for our help and support. We can believe them when they say they're oppressed or targeted or discriminated against. We can use our power to speak up when we see harm done. Sign the petitions, hold political and religious leaders accountable for harmful and dangerous words and rhetoric. Call your legislators, volunteer. Maybe this is how we can love all of our neighbors, not just the ones that look like you. 160 years ago, Frederick Douglass gave us those speeches, or the speech that Beth read, and 59 years ago, Martin Luther King gave speeches too, both warning that oppression and keeping people down can only be tolerated for so long before resistance escalates more and more. People in Selma suffered terribly, and still they marched for their right to vote until the nation, politicians, and religious leaders listened and took action. Today, our Black and brown-skinned neighbors worry about law enforcement involvement and potential violence, and so they demonstrate and call for reforms. They're tired of waiting. LGBTQ people are watching as more and more bills are introduced in state legislatures, and a Supreme Court justice just this week called again for the repeal of marriage equality. And I'll tell you, we LGBTQ people are scared and tired. Women, we're seeing our healthcare rights erode on a regular basis. Just this week. And violence against women continues to increase. And I'm telling you, women are getting angry. And we all watch more and more people die because of gun violence, because we can't figure out how to make sensible gun laws. And I know that everyone here is weary about that. So will this country heed the warnings of Douglass and King, or will we allow oppressed people to continue to get louder and louder, and then what until leaders pay attention? And so maybe loving our neighbor means joining them and getting louder. Maybe loving our neighbor means reading some banned books and learning from marginalized voices. Maybe loving our neighbor means listening and believing them when they say something's not right. Maybe loving our neighbor means using our privilege in helpful ways when we're asked. Maybe loving our neighbor means listening to and singing songs written by BIPOC musicians and artists like we are today in worship. I'm not sure if you noticed, all the music is written by BIPOC folk. Loving our neighbor means that this congregation is a member of the NAACP of Boulder County, and Beth is on the Religious Affairs Committee, and many of us attend and support programs that they put on. Loving our neighbor also means that this congregation pays reparations whenever we utilize spirituals, as Beth talked about, and we'll be sending a check for $320 to cover the spirituals we sang in 2023 to the Center for African and African American Studies at CU Boulder. And maybe loving our neighbor is a way for us to love God. So people of God, we're going to go into our groups. If you've not been here before, we're going to find a neighbor and reflect. What is it that you're hearing today that you want to explore for yourself? And how will you love your neighbor in new ways? And so find someone, and we'll have 2 minutes. Beautiful. I hope you had good conversation. Is there any, Beth is going to pass the mic. Is there anyone who wants to share? What's your takeaway I know Kari has one, a pilgrimage spot.
Well, I think what Jackie's talking about is the pilgrimage spot as our local movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
So I know many of you watched the movie or read the book Cast together as a group. And a good friend of mine and I went to see the movie Origin, which is about the experience of the woman who wrote the book as she's writing the book and what brought her to write the book. And this, my good friend, as you might imagine, is we would call a person of good conscience and would fit in here with the values of our church, but she cried through the entire thing. And afterwards, I said, every high school senior should watch this movie. And I said, nobody should be able to get a college degree without watching this movie. And I didn't cry through the whole thing, but I've had an emotional hangover ever since. And I think it's necessary for everyone. Certainly in this congregation, maybe even form a group and people go together. But it's very well required watching, I believe.
Thank you, Kari.
Any other reflections?
I was watching the local news the other night, and Denver Public Schools is really struggling with all the immigrants that are coming in, and that the kids don't have any clothes. And there was a gay woman who was doing the interview, and it showed her accepting a jacket from a woman wearing a hijab, and the jacket was to go to a Venezuelan kid. So that's what came up for me, Jackie. Thank you, Carol. Other reflections?
I'm not going to stand up,
It's okay.
but I lit a candle for the people of Ukraine who are suffering under the pressures, the terrible acts by autocrat. And there's not much I can do. We can have policies as our government supporting, and I think there is funds that have been allocated, a large amount, to help the people in Ukraine.
Jean, I'm noticing your shirt.
Oh, it's a great shirt.
Do you want to say something about your shirt?
My shirt says I'm with the band, and it's got the books, well, some of them, obviously.
Yeah.
The shirt's not big enough for all of them, but I look at them, I'm like, seriously?
I'm with the band. That's beautiful. Anybody else who wants to share a reflection?
Maddie.
Grow up in a very urbanized area. Grow up in a very, a very crowded city environment. I grew up in Hudson County, right across from Manhattan. Everybody pours into Manhattan, crosses the river, and fills up the whole front line of Hudson County. I was thrown together with every kind of ethnicity. That was the start, because a lot of people were coming in from Europe before, during, and after the World Wars. And I didn't live, as some people put, isolated neighborhoods, like Little Italy or little this or little that. We were just mixed. And you learned to know who you liked and who you didn't like for them, themselves, their behavior, their attitude. And that was very interesting. I never met black people. It was all European white people, till I went to college in Jersey City. And I realized we were probably mostly first generation college, like me. We were probably what you would call middle class, black or white. But I had good experiences with black people. And I won't go into it, but I have a favorite Jersey City story that involves a little blonde and a black guy. And just being thrown together made us have to start thinking and sorting. And I wish that would keep going on.
I'm sure Maddie would be glad to share more if you want to hear more. Thank you, everyone, for sharing
Yes,
reflections.
thank
Did we
you.
get everybody who wanted to?
Beautiful. So, my friends, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength, and love all of your neighbors as yourself. Let us take a couple of minutes of silent reflection.
Greetings to you wherever you are watching this. For those of you whom I have yet to meet in person, I'm Reverend Nicola Marsh, pastor here at Community UCC. And we see that people like you are watching our live stream each week. And because of this, we are excited to be embarking upon an experiment. And we need you. If you are engaging with us regularly, finding meaning in what we are about, we would like to extend a special invitation for you to be among the first CUCC digital disciples. For signing up for just $10 a month, you will receive a t-shirt with the new CUCC logo. And we are also exploring the idea of offering other content to those of you who are part of this new and growing area of digital ministry. Sign up to support us in this new way at cuccboulder.org/support by clicking on the yellow donate tab and noting you are a digital disciple in the instructions. Or as always, we welcome an old-fashioned check mailed to us at CUCC, P.O. Box 3646, Boulder, Colorado 80307. Thank you for being and building beloved community with us, and thank you for your gift, whatever it might be.